Good afternoon. The interview today is with Angela Araujo. She's living right now in Sao Paulo. So, Angela, what do you think is the relationship between language and culture?
I believe that language and culture are intertwined. One cannot exist with the other. The culture is the consequence of the language, as it is the language the consequence of the culture. What I want to say is that when we want to express something in our culture, we use words, and that's how we express ourselves. And in the same way, our language is part of our culture, so you cannot tear them apart, but they are just one whole thing that depends on the other. It's a codependent relationship, I believe.
Thank you so much. So, the next question is, what is the influence of culture in the process of a foreign language process?
We can speak the words, but many times we cannot convey or understand what they want to say. A very simple example could be when we're watching a movie. It doesn't matter if you understand English, but if you don't understand the culture of the American people, it's really hard to relate and maybe laugh at the same jokes. So definitely the culture is a big part of the learning process of a foreign language. We must understand their traditions, we must understand their beliefs, their jokes, maybe their history, the culture itself, to be able to interact and really understand and learn this language. It's not just about words, it's not just a communication tool, but communication is based on so many things, and it is very important, and it's a big and has a big influence in the process of the foreign language learning.
Okay. Which cultural expressions do you know countries have through language?
There are a couple of expressions that are shared among cultures, among languages, no matter if it's Spanish or English. One of them is break the ice, which means it's like get together, finish that awkward moment when you're meeting new people. Another one is a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. That's also another expression that goes through languages, but many of these idioms have a lot to do with the culture, sometimes with religion. And maybe an example could be, I don't know, it's a piece of cake, or break a leg. If you translate that literally, you would basically have something that makes no sense. So this kind of idioms and kind of expressions somehow have a culture behind it that gives it another meaning, and that's why it's important to know the background of the culture, the background of these words and expressions, to be able to understand better what they mean.
Thank you. The next question is, why do you think is it important to have an oral tradition in a country?
We are verbal people. We need to speak, and I believe that the best way to pass on our culture and our tradition is through words, orally. An example can be, I don't know, myths, or let's talk about philosophy. The Greeks, I think it was Socrates. Socrates, he never wrote a book, he only spoke, and his words passed on until today. We still hear about him. I'm Colombian, so we hear about the legends, and most of those legends were never written down. Most of those legends were told by our grandparents to our parents, and then to us, and we will tell the same stories to our children. So the oral tradition not only preserves the culture, but it also gives the richness that is necessary of the country itself, of the tradition itself. So just to summarize, I think that oral tradition is very important, and especially nowadays when we have so much internet, I think we have to preserve that way of speaking and of communicating ourselves with words correctly and expressing our beliefs and our culture orally.
Okay, thank you. What do you think? Do we teach language using culture, or do we teach culture using language?
I think you cannot divide it like into two separate things. I believe that there's moments when you teach language using culture, and there are moments when you teach culture using language. When I was learning Korean, for example, I remember my teachers used language to teach us the culture. Or there were moments when we were maybe cooking and learning or doing some role play, and through our actions we were learning the culture and the language at the same time. I think that it depends on the situation, but definitely these two things have to go together. It can never be just language. It must always have the culture involved when we're teaching a foreign language. So I don't believe there's a correct order. I just think that they are just situations where using the culture might be easier for the student to understand the expression that we want to say, while there's another moments where the language can allow this person to understand why this culture believes this or behaves this way. So it's a matter of the circumstances more than the correct methodology.
Okay, and the last question is, do you take into account culture in the strategies you use in your English classes? Can you give me some examples, please?
I think that's the fun part of teaching. When you are able to bring these traditions and culture to your students. And I think if they're young children, it's even more fun. So, for example, Easter. Easter in some countries is very religious. In some countries, it's just about the bunnies and the eggs. And then you can teach all this kind of language and all these kind of expressions that are around that. The same with Halloween. Thanksgiving is an excellent example of teaching culture and language at the same time, and culture and history. So of course I take into account this kind of strategies. I think they're very useful and dynamic, and they give that special taste to the class. Being able to sing songs like, I know, the Itsy Bitsy Spider, that is so normal and traditional for children in the US. Maybe you can teach that to a grown-up too, and it's a way of them understanding how children also think and how they grow up. Or what else? I don't know, even the I don't know, like Christmas carols or the Independence Day. The 4th of July, how important it is for an American person. And you can have discussions about that. How is the Independence Day in your country? What do you do? Do you have fireworks? Do people sit together and watch the fireworks go off? How about your country? Do you have any kind of celebration? Is there a parade? Those kind of things give you an opportunity to develop language and culture. And it's also an excellent way to exchange ideas and exchange cultures, because many times in your classroom you might have people from all the same nationality, but even among the same country, you have different cultures. And for example, you can also have foreigners from other countries in your classroom who are not English speakers, and you can also have an opportunity to exchange that kind of culture. So it's essential and makes the classes even more fun.
Thank you so much for your opinion. It was really interesting hearing what you thought about it. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.